Chinese New Year is the biggest annual celebration in China, and usually many people who work here in Beijing travel home for the festive season. It is for some of them the only time they get to see their families all year. But for the second straight year, the festivities are being disrupted by COVID-19, this time due to a resurgence of cases in some parts of the country. But while authorities have stopped short of issuing an outright ban on domestic travel, new measures have been put in place to prevent the chances of a super spreader event, and many are heeding the call to stay put for the holidays.
This is what the Beijing railway station typically looks like every Chinese New Year. A hive of activity, hundreds of millions of Chinese on their way home to celebrate the festivities. But what a difference a year or two makes. Typically known as the world's largest annual human migration, the Spring Festival travel rush, or Chunyuan this year, is just a fraction of what it was prior to the COVID-19 pandemic. Authorities expect 1.15 billion passenger trips this year, 20% down year on year, and more than 60% lower than in 2019, before the pandemic struck.
We have visited this railway station every Chinese New Year in the last few years, and I can tell you, I have never seen it this empty. It's perhaps not what people would have expected for 2021, as life here in China has pretty much gone back to normal. That's until there was a resurgence of new cases at the end of last year. A small number compared to what China had handled at its peak, but enough for authorities to tell people to stay put and not travel unless necessary to prevent the further spread of the virus.
34-year-old Zhu Lin is one who has heeded the call. During the festive period, the yoga studio owner typically heads home to central China's Henan province or travels to vacation spots like tropical Hainan Island. But this year, she will remain in Beijing.
担忧呢，就是第一个是疫情不稳定，怕来回路上不安全，然后还有回去的隔离，回来的隔离，担心这个就会影响了很多正常的行程。
Authorities have put in place strict travel restrictions, which has made going home difficult for many. This includes mandatory COVID-19 tests and home observation in some areas. Half of Miss Zhu's staff have chosen to forgo their trips, and while the studio usually closes for the new year, she sees a business opportunity this time round.
我觉得也是挺难得的一个机会，因为大家今年都不出京嘛，好多会员，我们现在馆里边很多会员就问我们，哎，你春节放不放假呀？哎，别放假了，我们正好有休息的时间，可以天天来上课啊。
Miss Zhu is not alone. After all, banners like this one in Beijing remind people to not leave the city unless necessary. The Chinese capital reported a handful of cases in January and has since imposed some of the strictest restrictions for incoming travelers. This also as it prepares to host China's all-important annual parliamentary meetings next month.
大伙都在这聚餐嘛，难过那肯定的，不再跟家人一起是吧？
就肯定没有在老家待着那么热闹呗，但是那怎么办呀？那你现在疫情这样，你只能就选择今年先不回去吧。
With more choosing to stay put, travel platform Trip.com Group says it has seen air ticket prices fall by more than 60% on some routes. But it says more Chinese are looking to alternatives like hotel staycations or short trips in the vicinity to celebrate the new year. Skiing and hot springs also remain in the top searches. The group says it remains hopeful that there will be a recovery as the weather gets warmer in the coming months.
So we're reasonably optimistic. Like last year, by the end of the first half or into the second half of the year, we already see 80–90% recovery. And in some destinations, we're seeing more than 100%, you know, much better, even better than the pre-COVID. And in the long run, as I said, we're still very optimistic about the leisure travel market.
But in spite of the hassle, there are still some who are choosing to head home, like 25-year-old Liu Mingxia. The beautician who works in Beijing will return to neighboring Shanxi province to celebrate the New Year with her family. After all, the week-long break is the longest vacation she gets each year.
本身一年之中跟父母团聚的机会就很少，过年是大家一个需要团聚的日子，而且家里的父母呢，他们就是年龄会越来越大。
To prepare for her journey home, she is arming herself with the COVID-19 test and says celebrations are bound to be muted this year.
这样的话也是对身边人、对自己的负责嘛。需要做的，那我们就去做，这个我觉得没有什么麻烦的。
And Miss Liu certainly hopes that her journey back to Beijing after the Chinese New Year break will be smooth as well.
1, 2, 3.
Paul NOMCHONG's family was one of the first to arrive in Australia from China more than 140 years ago. Today, Paul has kept their customs alive through his Chinese Lion Dance company.
We're very fortunate to have these things passed down, and that's the one thing which keeps me going is the traditional aspect.
The COVID-19 pandemic hasn't stopped Paul's passion for practicing and performing lion dance. His students now preparing for Chinese New Year.
Learning about my culture, my tradition, and being able to share that with the rest of Sydney, I think is really special.
It's particularly special this year considering this is the only school that will be performing in the Sydney parade. Chinese New Year in Sydney usually attracts up to 1.5 million visitors, making it the largest event of its kind outside of Asia. But COVID-19 has caused celebrations to be scaled back.
Even the businesses around Chinatown are very happy that we're able to do it. Due to COVID, some businesses here have shut down, but the ones which are still going, that's pretty much what we're doing it for, these guys.
February usually has the biggest influx of Chinese tourists to Australia. In 2019, the country had more than 200,000 Chinese visitors, and this year, with flights from China grounded, there will be none.
This is Chinatown in Sydney, usually the heart of Australia's bustling and bright Chinese New Year celebrations. But it's been hit hard by border closures, and this year instead will be marked by businesses that can barely make ends meet.
The February financial fallout will be immense.
It's expected that it will cost the Australian economy somewhere between $1.4 to $1.6 billion. Now, New South Wales will take the biggest hit because the majority of Chinese tourists arrive into Sydney, followed by Victoria and Melbourne, and also Queensland because of its, its holiday and beach destinations.
It's not just Chinese businesses that are suffering, but the entire hospitality and tourism sector. During Chinese New Year, it's places like this wildlife park that are usually teeming with tourists.
We've always been a very popular market for Chinese visitors, and I think that will always be the case because our wildlife is so unique, so different. The koala is such a huge icon, so yeah, it would have accounted for about 20% of the business.
These animals now rely on locals for a feed, and so too do restaurants across the country. The survival of businesses here now hinging on hopes locals will fill the void left by the lack of Chinese tourists.
Taiwan and Hong Kong have also raised their guard against a resurgence of COVID-19 cases during the Chinese New Year holiday period, and residents will be ushering in the Year of the Ox with varying degrees of pandemic curbs. Major celebrations across Taiwan have been cancelled, and many Taiwanese will be marking the festivities without their famous street banquets for the first time in decades.
From his makeshift kitchen, Hong Zimao makes traditional Taiwanese dishes for walk-in customers. Many of these are must-have dishes for Chinese New Year. But this roadside stall is a far cry from Chef Hong's past ventures. If not for COVID-19, he would be cooking for hundreds of guests at Taiwan's unique street banquets known as bandou.
因为那个时候就是没有生意了嘛，就是基本上就是在一个吃老本的状态。人家跟我说要做热的，我们就找一个位置，然后在这边，这是固定地点，然后起炉灶做热的，因应大家的需求。
Chef Han used to run bandou, or large-scale outdoor banquets, where large amounts of food is prepared in makeshift roadside kitchens, using giant pots and pans. A tradition that's also seen in some parts of southern China. The bandou culture blossomed in Neimen, a rural district in southern Taiwan that's surrounded by infertile mountainous terrains. Here's Neimen District in Kaohsiung City, the home of Taiwan's best bandou chef. When the bandou culture was at its peak, 1 out of every 5 households was running the business. But the bandou industry has been in decline in recent years. Even before the coronavirus pandemic, demand for roadside banquet services has dwindled due to Taiwan's changing food culture and a lack of young people joining the industry. Tang Fu-LUNG has been working as a bandou chef in Neimen for more than 30 years. The 52-year-old said in his heyday, he once cooked and served 400 tables in one day.
包括煎、煮、炒、炸，开菜单、做公关，每一个环节，伊拢爱会到位，伊才有法度做一个完整，做一个做全方位总铺师。
These days, instead of under a giant makeshift tent, Chef Tang cooks bandou dishes mostly from his own kitchen. And instead of serving hundreds of tables all at the same time, he's taking orders online and providing home delivery services. As Taiwan raises its guard against a resurgence of new COVID-19 cases, more people choose to stay home during the Chinese New Year holiday, boosting demand for these readily cooked dishes.
以往我们都会到餐厅去嘛，那现在就是疫情的关系，所以就没有到餐厅去了。就今年会改为就是采买回家，这样子围炉这样子。
就过年过啊，祖囝要定下要食呀。阮就想讲要去外口食，阮祖囝讲无爱啦，讲要倒阮遐啦。讲叫我要鸡啊，转啊烘汤啊，鸡买啥，安尼，佫买寡济，转啊食安尼啦。
While many fear that COVID-19 may have dealt a fatal blow to Taiwan's street banquet culture, this Chinese New Year, Neimen's bandou chefs are determined to keep the bandou legacy and their livelihoods alive, in whatever form it may take.
Just feel the hustle and bustle of this popular flower market in Kowloon. You can hardly find a clue of a global pandemic, except that everybody is wearing a mask. But Hong Kong is actually still riding through the 4th wave of its coronavirus outbreak, with an average of dozens of local cases reported every day. Nonetheless, as part of the Chinese New Year celebrations, shoppers have still come out in scores to snap up their auspicious items. It's not quite business as usual for the retailers, however, as they are facing a double whammy with an economic downturn and a government decision to extend social distancing rules beyond the New Year. Many official celebrations have been cancelled, and this year's mega flower fair has been downsized due to COVID concerns. So traders have to look to places like this one for the seasonal patrons. But there are still people who want to keep this festive spirit alive by decorating their homes with their favorite blooms, be it peach blossoms for those looking out for romance, or just daffodils for floral aroma. To many people, not only do these flowers give you great delight, but they also help you usher in the best fortunes for the new year.
I seldom go to a flower market in the previous year, but this year I really want some stimulation for me. Yeah, so boring in the whole year without any traveling, stay away from family members. So this is the reason I want to see some atmosphere of New Year from the flower market.
I really hope everyone good health, and then no need to wear mask, and then everyone can go dining, no more limitation, without any limitation.
Hong Kong has not experienced a full lockdown since the pandemic started, but the residents have to put up with anti-COVID-19 measures on a daily basis for almost a year now. And this is affecting even this temple right here. For the first time since 100 years ago, the famous Taoist Wong Tai Sin Temple has to cancel its New Year incense burning ritual to avoid crowds. Normally the event attracts thousands of worshippers who want to be the first one to make a wish with a burning stick at the stroke of midnight in the new year. For those who want to present offerings to the ancient gods, there are also extra steps to take. The government is requiring every visitor to register at the temple, either with staff or with this mobile phone. On February the 12th, the hard-working, tolerant and faithful oxen shrugged off the rats to take center stage in the Chinese zodiac. The past 2 years have been tough for Hong Kong, with a global pandemic following an unprecedented social unrest in 2019. As the city welcomes the year of ox, residents perhaps have to borrow the spirit of the animal as they hope for a better year ahead.
Chinese New Year celebrations in Malaysia this year have been scaled down significantly due to the pandemic. The Southeast Asian nation has been struggling to contain the latest wave of the outbreak, with daily new cases surging past 5,000 on some days. With many parts of the country in lockdown and borders closed, Malaysians that are celebrating at home and abroad have found new ways to keep the festive spirit alive.
For housewife Carol Cheng, ushering in a Chinese New Year has gotten a lot greener this year. The mother of 3 has taken up urban farming during the lockdown, growing all sorts of vegetables in her backyard. Although some of her relatives are unable to join the family gathering due to the travel ban, this year will be special because some of her homegrown bok choy, gailan and tomatoes are on the menu. Despite the lockdown, Carol has insisted on making the traditional snacks that are eaten once a year during the festive season. Her family's all-time favorite is the arrowhead chips. Although she's making them alone this year without her sister's help, and that doesn't stop her from chatting with her on social media platforms.
I make around 10 kg for arrowhead chips. This year I make less. Because of MCO, there's no visitor, so I cannot stock up too much.
Who taught you, how to make Chinese New Year snacks?
Oh, everything I learned from Facebook. I get all the recipe from Facebook.
I thought you learned from your mom. No.
My mom, not really, but some of it, yes. Not all.
Making arrowhead chips that look like golden coins isn't difficult, she said. But the process of making them, from scrubbing, cleaning to peeling and slicing them one by one, takes hours. Now they're ready for deep fry. Once the chips turn lightly golden brown, remove them quickly and sprinkle some salt, and voila. The sight and aroma of these golden chips are bound to lift the New Year spirit. While Carol prefers to make them at home, these days arrowhead chips can be found in most supermarkets at about $5 a tub. Known as zigu in Mandarin or ngagu in Cantonese, the arrowhead are quite rare. They are only sold once a year, just before Chinese New Year.
Another popular ingredient used in Chinese New Year cooking is lily bulb or baihe. Now this is fresh one imported from Lanzhou, China. I'm going to use it for my dessert for the first day of Chinese New Year. It's said to be auspicious on day 1 of Chinese New Year to have something sweet, and this dessert is perfect. And the recipe is so simple. First, boil a handful of red dates, lotus seeds, and some rock sugar if you like it sweet. While waiting, tear the lily bulb into petals. I just wash and clean them in salt water. Now, 百年好合 means hundreds of years of happiness and harmony.
That's why Baihe is used to mark auspicious celebration. It's customary for children to serve their parents and grandparents on the first day of Chinese New Year, when they pay respect and receive blessing and good luck. And of course, the ang bao, or red packet.
Study hard, good boy.
Indeed, it's a time of the year many children are waiting to collect ang bao from their relatives, uncles and aunties, and other visitors. Although this year's collection may be affected somewhat by the lockdown.
谢谢.
Celebrating Chinese New Year this year will be a whole new experience for 56-year-old banker Ho Chin Shin. It's his first time spending it away from his family and friends in his hometown Sarawak in East Malaysia, despite living abroad in Singapore for about 8 years now.
In Kuching, our Chinese New Year celebrations have always been a blast. Is a lot of people, a lot of sights and sounds, firecrackers. I remember that I would buy the flight tickets from Singapore to Sarawak like 10 months before the next Chinese New Year. This year, unfortunately, the ticket has been cancelled. The flights have been cancelled. So is something that is totally unexpected.
Like Mr. Ho, returning home for the festive break is not an option for many Malaysians living or working in Singapore due to the ongoing travel restrictions. So to help some Malaysians feel less alone this festive season, some members of the Malaysian Association in Singapore have welcomed their fellow countrymen into their homes.
That's the culture we grew up with, you know, the open house, the feeding people, the wanting to welcome people from our own home, our hometown, into our own homes. You know, as long as we're Malaysian, we all kind of understand each other. So this is really why the initiative even started.
Healthcare frontliner Wendy Ng has also chosen to remain here. She's concerned by the state of COVID-19 infections across the causeway and is also deterred by the costs and time in quarantine, which one has to bear in order to cross borders.
I think the quarantine time served is the major issue, and also because I work in a high-risk environment, I really do not want to bring any transmission back and forth, whether to my family or to my patients.
Instead, Ms. Ng will celebrate with her colleagues, some of whom are also unable to return to their respective countries. She's also lucky to have some familiar faces here, friends who have become like a second family to her. But even as Malaysians here embrace a different festive season, the thought of missing family reunion dinners still stung.
This film, right? Watching it before. I think it has been tough. Actually, it's already been a year that I haven't been able to see them. You know, it's going to be another birthday missed, another Chinese New Year missed. So I think the best I can do right now is just call my mom every day and my dad as well, you know, video call. At least we have technology right now. With vaccinations being rolled out globally, it's hoped that the time will soon come for borders to be reopened and families reunited.